Good evening. This is Mike Siver from the Mike Siver Show, along with my very special guest, Carrie Sluter. And tonight we're going to talk about environmental awareness and how that impacts our children and youth when they're young to influence how they become when they get older. And Carrie and I have been talking about this over the last couple of weeks, and especially tonight. And Carrie's got some ideas she'd like to start talking about. So with that, Carrie, can you start with some of the questions and conversation we had earlier?
I had, in looking at your book, relating it to some of the things that I'm looking at in my life and working with the people that I'm working with in counseling and coaching and developing some products for families. The environmental awareness chapter in your book really hit home for me. Was one part of it that we become a product of our environment. The way that you talked about it in your book, you had mentioned a friend of yours that is an environmentalist.
Yeah.
You're a counselor for teens, and how that plays together. We're in the same world. In her perspective, she's looking at the plants and the trees and concerned about the teenagers and the youth that are not growing up concerned about them.
Well, that's the same thing that when we started this conversation, she's very passionate. She was and is to this day, a very passionate environmentalist. And we got to talking about just what you just mentioned, about she wished that all children would learn to become environmentalists, so when they grew older, we would protect our earth.
Right.
And I said, they are environmentally aware now.
Right.
They're very aware of their environment.
Right.
And because of the youth I used to deal with, which were almost all incarcerated and low-income families, their environment is survival.
Right.
All they want to do is survive, and they're aware of who's on the street, who's not on the street, what's on the street,
Right.
where the street ends, that they're safe and not safe.
Mm-hmm.
And they are fully in tune with their environment.
Mm-hmm.
Now, are they worried about the tree falling down in Oregon? No. Not even in the slightest.
No.
They're worrying about the ice caps melting?
Nope.
No.
Nope. Global warming? No.
They may have some concern about that as they get older,
Mm-hmm.
but right now, their environment is pure survival.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they have clothes on their back, food on the table, and safety walking down the street. And then that grows with the environmental learning, and we talked about that too, because that becomes behaviors. And not every child grows up to be a batterer if their father's a batterer.
Right.
But the inclination's there. The behavior's there. They witness that happening. That's environmental awareness.
Mm-hmm.
So in that environment, in the home environment, and then the old saying that most children know how to act and interact with adults as adults by the time they're 9 or 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they're going to get educationally smarter,
Right.
and they're going to go to school and
Experientially.
experientially, they're going to get smarter and
Experience,
smarter.
Yeah.
But they learn how mom treats dad, how dad treats mom, and how mom and dad treat kids. They know all that by the time they're 9 or 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And that's frightening.
Right.
That's frightening.
Well,
So this is,
it's like your chapter right before it that talks about the sponge,
Yeah.
how we absorb things from our environment.
right.
You know, everything they're around, and how that plays on what I view things from the Bible standpoint. The environmental, knowing what's going on around you at all times,
Right.
is called walking circumspectfully.
Yep.
When you're driving, an example of that is when you're driving down the road, most drivers are checking the rearview mirror when they come to a stop, and they're making sure that the car behind them is stopping.
Yep.
That's circumspectfully. You know what's coming at you from all angles,
Yep.
and you're watching at all times. And I've even been in a position many times where you see something in your rearview mirror, you see the driver's not looking, or they're not slowing down fast enough. You ease up on your brake and move forward because there's room.
Yep.
So you're aware of your environment.
Yep.
Children are aware of their environment. You mentioned that. They're always aware of their environment.
Yep.
But they're also absorbing from that environment. They're learning, they're gaining their experiences in life
Yep.
from the actions and choices of the people around them. which takes us back to the old terminology of you become a product of your environment.
Yep.
They become a product of that. If the environment is anger, frustration, drinking, or parents fighting and arguing, different things like that, that's what the child is absorbing like a sponge.
Yep.
Their habits, their traits, their expressions, everything is from the environment that they're in. So when it comes to the taking that back to the environmentally knowing your environment, they're also seeing what they're seeing from technology standpoint. This world has gone so technology that the phone is like hooked at everybody's hip.
Yep.
It's the most important thing in our world. People will not leave home without it. People who are trying to reach us can't even imagine why you wouldn't return their call or answer it. You shut it off because you're in a meeting and you've got somebody's upset because you didn't get back with them soon enough. Back in the day, our environment was you go out and you do your things, you can go shopping, you can do all these things, go through your day, you go to work for 8 hours, you come home, you check your answer machine. And that was before, when we had answering machines.
Yeah.
Prior
Yep.
to that, they just keep calling you back.
Yep.
And they would wait. But we're training ourselves and we're training our children that we are at the beck and call. We are dependent on technology. We're teaching habits through technology. When the siblings that they're growing up under, as I mentioned before when we were talking, used to be when I was a kid, I was learning from my big brother who was climbing the tree.
Right.
Playing basketball, playing on the basketball courts. We did different things. Jumping rope.
Yep.
You're watching them and you're learning. Well, nowadays they're watching this with an iPad, and poking buttons and that aggressive behavior. A lot of that the aggressive behaviors, I believe, are being stemmed and encouraged more through technology. The products, the technology, everything is, I'm on the phone just a minute.
Yep.
No matter where you're at, you can be in the grocery store and and people are talking on the phone, and that's the most important thing going on in their world. So we're dealing with a lot of things in our environment.
Well, the same thing, talking about games and things that the children do today, if you had a 30-year-old and a 6 or 7-year-old or a 9-year-old, on the first time they both played the same game, whatever it was, and most of the games today have some violence in them, sometimes a lot of violence in them.
Sometimes, yeah.
The 30-year-old knows it's a game.
Right,
It's not real.
right. The children don't.
The children don't.
They're getting numb to it.
Yep, they're getting numb to
They're
it.
getting numb to it. I actually see where blood and guts and things like that, it's almost like it's not real to them.
Yep.
It's that virtual world that they're living in. If they're playing in those virtual worlds, that's their environment. And they're learning from it. They're absorbing like a sponge.
Yep.
And they're creating habits, thoughts, and they're becoming a person, developing into a person with habits and traits. They're not getting them from their older brothers and sisters who are saying, you can't do that. Mom and dad, because they're not with them. They're in this little world of their own, in that virtual world, whatever that is, whether it's building blocks or blowing up. Most of them, even though they're building something that they think is cool,
Yep.
it still has little bombs in it where they can go blow a hole in what they just built. And so is that impacting the generation, this new generation, like you said, so apropos, that yes, we were raised in this, so we know the difference.
Yep.
These kids aren't seeing enough of the difference of the two worlds.
Well, I caught myself the other day. I left home and left my cell phone at home.
Mm-hmm.
And I got about half a mile from home, and I remembered I left it at home. I almost turned around to go get it,
Oh, I have.
just to get my cell phone. And I had to force myself
Yeah.
to keep driving.
I did it yesterday. I was going to an appointment. I said, I'm going to be late. I can't go back and get it. I buy without it.
Yeah.
But it's become a habit for the whole world. And the biggest part is people know that they can reach me. And if they can't, then there's not a backup plan. That when I get home, I can check a message machine. But there really is, because my phone's there.
Well, I know the phone
So-
companies are going to love it when they hear me and people like me say the phone is now one of the most important things in my life.
Right.
And that should be so wrong.
It should not be, but we're all guilty of that.
Yeah.
Because of technology, we have changed our habits, and we are teaching the next generation by our choices and habits when it comes to technology, or when it comes to, our children, and what, if they're struggling in school, are they struggling because it's their environment? What environment are they in, number one? Are they in an environment of a family that's in disarray, or a problem going on that we need to detect? Or are they spending too much time in a virtual world, becoming disconnected with the person in them and the people around them?
Well, they are becoming disconnected, and for another reason, video games are exciting
Yep, they're great.
and energy packed. Life, as a rule,
It's not.
is boring.
Right. My son says that, my son says that all the time. I'm bored. If he doesn't
Yeah.
have his technology on him, he's bored. I'm
Yeah.
like, you can do this, this, this. Hey, I've got some work for you. I'll keep you on board. Well, how dare you say that? Work?
Yeah.
No, where's my iPad?
Well,
And
I'm
we-
hoping people are watching
We
this.
don't want them to get to that point.
Yeah,
right?
well, they are at that point.
We have to catch it and draw back.
And hopefully that we'll get some people either write the show or whatever and come in and be guests on the show and talk about this, because this is an ongoing problem for everybody.
Right.
And how to motivate children today. And they're not all the same, so please don't get me wrong
Oh,
here.
no.
There are some great children out there with goals and objectives and ideals, and that comes from the parents, instilling that into them when they're younger, setting boundaries at home.
Right.
As you and I have discussed in the past, boundaries for children are it's like a crib. You put a baby in a crib, the baby's got boundaries and has a ball in that crib.
Right.
They can play with the little things you give them, and they can run around, but they can't get in trouble because they got to stay in the crib.
Right.
When they get old enough to get out of the crib, there has to be boundaries created
Right.
by the parents.
Right.
Bedtimes, getting up times, meal times, homework times, TV times. There has to be boundaries created, and we're not doing that. Now, the parents that do that, it's hard. Being a parent is not an easy job.
No, it is not.
And nobody's going to sit here and say it is, because I was one and you're one.
Right.
And if you do the job correctly, and this is going to offend some parents out there, but if you do it right and take the time and expand the energy, the children become creative. And I've got a granddaughter who does that.
Right.
And I sit back in awe when the great-grandchildren come to our house. They don't have to have the TV on. They don't have to have the iPads. They can play for hours
Right.
with a blanket and some Lego blocks, and they can play for hours and hours. And one's a boy and one's a girl, and they don't fight.
Yep.
I mean, they do occasionally because they're brother and sister.
Right.
But she's had to work hard to get that, and she's tired sometimes. But the results are going to be great when those kids learn to become creative and thinkers and have goals and objectives and plan.
How old are they?
One's 4 and
Just
one's
kidding.
6.
Oh, see, that's an easy age though.
Yeah.
Because when they start being around 8 and 10, then that's when the technology is attractive to them.
Well-
They're seeing their kids for school, and I want to play that. They're playing it with their friends at school, and then it becomes that draw.
Well,
So there's a little bit, there's that line, Mike, that you cross, and the reason I know this and see it from a perspective of parenting is that didn't used to be a problem at my house because nobody had them.
right.
My kids were young enough that I still had control, and they could play. Well, they're at school, and their friend has a phone, and he's playing games, and they're playing that game. There's nothing that we have, and building blocks can't compare and entertain as well anymore. Once they've experienced that.
Well, they do experience it because they do have iPads.
Right, and once they've experienced that excitement of the game, the technology is so exciting, overwhelming. You said it yourself.
Yep.
There's so much excitement, wow, it's just a whole new world of excitement.
But where I was going with that is what she has done is there's a time frame for that. They know from this time to this
Exactly.
time they cannot play their iPads.
That's what,
And she's done that
point.
long enough now that they understand Mama's not giving in. We
Right.
can throw tantrums, and they did. We can scream, holler, and shout, we want to play this game, I want the iPad, I want
Right.
this. She says no until this time of the day or whatever it is.
Right.
And she sticks to it.
right,
And she gets exhausted sticking to it.
right,
But now they're learning when their time is up, they can play it and there's no arguments.
right.
There's no question, here's your iPads, go play them, have some fun, you got 2 hours, period, it's
Mm-hmm. Right.
done.
Right.
And-
That's what we're trying to get at is
Yeah.
there has to be boundaries from
Yep.
the parents, and you have to stand strong on those boundaries.
Oh, and it's
You know,
hard.
my 6-year-old has an iPad. You know, she likes to take pictures and stuff and do cropping and that.
Mm-hmm.
And so she has one, and she'll on her way home from school, we're not going home. She's going to go to a babysitter so I can come to the show and can we stop at home and get my iPad so I can have something to do? No, we're not going home to get your iPad.
Yep.
You're not going to start carrying it with you to entertain you everywhere.
Yep,
You will find entertainment in the company you're with.
yep.
And so we have to hold tight to those boundaries and keep them in the real world as well, not just let it be a babysitter. Because
Yeah.
that's easy to do.
Yeah.
It's just as easy to go and get that and appease the child so that I don't have to deal with it when she's back there, that's not fair, I want it. I won't have anything to do. Oh, you'll find something to do or you'll be bored. Bad you.
And that's what you were talking about, the chapter of sponge in my book is like an empty sponge, and we mentioned that a little bit earlier. The sponge will absorb whatever it's put in.
Right.
Doesn't matter what it's put in.
Mm-hmm.
It'll absorb it till it's full.
Right.
A child will absorb the environment it's in, no matter what environment it's in, until it's full. The sad part about that is a sponge, when you put it in clean water, doesn't clean the sponge, it dirties the water.
Right.
Until you do it enough times to where the sponge can start to get cleaner.
Right.
And like now you have foster kids, and you're learning exactly what that says. Most foster children try and bring their old environment that they're comfortable with. They grew up in it, they
Oh,
lived in
yeah.
it. They try and bring that to the new environment.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where it's even harder on parents because they don't get the support they need
Right.
over that first year, and it's usually a year, if not longer, that the children want to dirty the new water with their old habits, their old behaviors, their old language,
Right.
whatever they used to do, they want to bring into this new family. The new family, the mom and dad, have completely different ideas on how to
Right,
raise children.
Right, right.
So you got this huge, poor child full of dirty water, theoretically,
Right.
and then
I dealt with that.
a new clean parents trying to mix, and it is difficult.
Oh, boy, is it.
And
Try to explain
you've
this.
got a good example to speak on that.
Right.
So
Try explaining to a 6-year-old why it's not appropriate in our life, in our world, in this world. No, mom and daughter do not run the roads. She actually said to me, my real mom loved me more because she and I run the roads. We were buddies. We would run the roads. And, I'm like, out of a 5-year-old, I mean, she was just 5 at the time. And she was upset. She didn't think I loved her as much because I didn't do that. And apparently that was something that her mom had said to her about running the roads. Well, yep, you're my road runner. Well, you're not going to be my road runner. So it's two different worlds.
Yep.
But they want to bring those habits, and they're expecting to see the same results
Yep.
as what their environment from before, and they have to do an adjustment. They have to find that adjustment period, as well as I have to figure out how to explain to a child. It would have never occurred to me that she would have that terminology at 6.
yeah,
Or think of things that way, because my life is, mom has to go to work, are you gonna go with me, and you're gonna look that person in the eyes? There was a whole different world when you're dealing with children that you didn't start out with.
and then like I said, the
Two different
difficulty
worlds.
is sometimes you're not provided with the psychological support that you need
Mm-hmm.
to deal with the behaviors of the children. you're sort of left on your own.
Right.
And that's scary for parents.
It's great that you brought that up, Mike, because we've really had a lot of talk lately between the foster parents and fostering services that they offer so much counseling for the kids and things that are available for the children. But what about the parents
None.
who are not expecting this child, who are not prepared to handle the child's their habits and the way that they've developed, because they're a product of their old environment. Now you're going to bring them into your environment, and it's a challenge sometimes knowing how to deal with it. So the point in that is there's so many counseling and counseling things available for especially foster children.
Yep.
But there's not enough out there available for the foster parent who is learning to adjust as well. Because now my environment is different as well. And it's like, you're messing with my world.
Yep.
And so there's an adjustment period, and you're getting two different children together from different worlds, and you're trying to mesh them, and you've got this one with these habits, and this one with these, and this one with these habits. All of a sudden, there's some dirty water.
And it's frightening because I don't get that too much. I mean, it's more over here in Kalamazoo County. I'm over in Van Buren County. And in my little area, I don't get as much of the foster parenting counseling as...
Well, foster parenting is my world. It's like the environmentalist in
Yeah.
your world.
Yep.
We see things the same, but it's just a different world. I am in the fostering circle.
Yeah.
So that really touches with me. In that.
Well, that's why I brought that up, because
Yeah.
you've got some great experience with that. And you're a great witness to what I've written in my books
Oh, yeah.
is factual. It's not just... I've had a lot of years' experience dealing with this stuff.
Right.
And I managed to put it in a language most people understand.
Right.
And
Like the sponge,
and it's so true. And at some point, we're hoping that we can get more support for parents, because when kids come into a new relationship or a new family, they know how to act,
Right.
because they learned that from their old family. They know how to act. It's the parents who don't know how to act.
Right.
A lot of them don't know how to respond to, no, I'm not doing that. And what do you-
Yeah. It's like, what do you mean? Are you talking to me? You are the child. Last I knew, I was in charge.
No, you're not. And then if you get, like, you've got two children from two different environments, a lot of times they will collude to try and figure out how to run you.
Uh-huh.
How to-
I went through that. It was like
And
all
how to-
these kids trying to get me to do things their way.
Yeah.
And every one of them wanting me to appease them.
And it's a huge challenge. And I just think if parents understood environmental learning, environmental growth, the sponge, that we talk about that, if parents really understood, they know it. I know they know it, but they haven't, how do I want to say it, digested it, or thought about it, or had a discussion about the sponge, about this new foster child they've got is not going to come in and be the epitome of children that they have in their mind.
Well, what I found, Mike, one of the biggest things I found is that the world that they lived in, they, in their mind, thought was normal.
Yeah.
It was standard procedure for them. That was normal. They didn't know that there was a problem because it was the environment that they
Yep.
had become accustomed to.
Yep.
If you live in an area and there is a dump across the road and there's garbage and there's a smell there, unless you move because you can't handle it, if you stay there long enough, you become accustomed to
Yep.
it. You adjust your thinking and your acceptance to that environment.
Yep.
This is the one I chose. This is where I'm at, and you wouldn't even recognize the odor that when you first got there. It's like, oh man, I don't know if I can live here. You live there for 6 months, and next thing you know, you're just like oblivious to it.
Yep.
Because it's a product of your environment
Yep.
and your area. You've accustomed to it and you've accepted it. Now, the children and these kids are becoming accustomed to whatever environment they're in. If there's drugs on the corner, that just becomes a part of the norm in their life.
Yep.
Now, the kids from Portage or the kids from another area or Kalamazoo or whatever, other sides of town that don't have the drugs on the corner as much, it's not as obvious,
Right.
okay? They're going, oh my gosh, really? That's what they're doing? You know, over on their other side of town.
Yep.
They drive through there and they're like, ooh, they feel uncomfortable there. So there's that adjustment that and an acceptance to, if you are a sponge, we are a sponge as
Yeah.
people,
Yep.
and we can put ourselves in purple water, and we're going to become purple.
Yep.
We squeeze that out. Now, it's going to take a long time
Yep.
to get all of the purple out, because even if you rinse it out once, twice, 3 times, and then you put it in yellow, you're still going to get what? You're probably not going to get yellow yet.
No, you're not yet.
You're still going to have some mixture of color.
Yeah.
And so we as people are the same way. It takes a long time to clean out the garbage, the old habits, the things that we've accepted as our behaviors,
Yeah.
and to retrain ourselves and rinse ourselves clean enough, if you will,
Yeah.
to become the person or the child that you want at that time, to adjust to the new environment and new circumstances.
Yeah, and then at the other hand, like you said, your daughter said that you don't love me like my mom did because you didn't do this with me or don't do that with me. But you can't at that stage say your mom was no good or you'd still be with her.
Exactly.
Oh, you can't.
Oh, no.
You can't do that.
Oh, no.
And
just
they'll
the
tell you
opposite.
you can't do that either.
Yep, I
There-
never wanted to.
There's a couple of years when they grow up that they'll realize that themselves. And it almost has to be a self-discovery. That they understand, if my environment was so good before, why was I taken out of it? And then they'll learn that depending on your consistency, your regularity of what you do, your integrity and your honesty and your truthfulness with them on a consistent basis, they will start to figure out real life.
Right.
And then like you and I both do, then if you can introduce the Word of God with it as well,
Yeah.
and not jam it down their throats,
Right.
but say there's another way, there's another alternative.
Well, how I handle that, being who I am, of course, there's a lack of training for the adoptive parents who are taking in these kids to how to handle those things. But for me, it was so easy because it was just, well, in my world, I go to work every day, and of course I could use the examples of my life because we have a nice house. I have to take time to clean it,
Yep.
or it would be a mess. Do you remember what you lived in before? We want to live in a nice and clean environment, and some people are okay with that. I'm not. So I adjusted her thinking to agree with my world.
Right.
And it worked like a charm because all of a sudden she's like, yeah, we take care of our house now. You know, we don't want to be like that. We work to make a living,
Yep.
so we can drive a nice car because, you know, some of the things that she had said, there were several things that told me that was the way to handle it with her, is to teach her about why we don't run the roads in a way
Yeah.
of, this is what we do here, and that's my way of showing you my love, is because I provide well for you. I make sure that you are home at bedtime, tucked in with a Bible and prayer and story time, and we read and we have time for that stuff. If we were running the roads all day, I wouldn't be able to do that with you. Which is more important to you?
That's the part, that's your key right there, you said.
Yep. Which is more important to you?
Start asking questions.
Yep, I did. And after I explained some things, I said, I
Yeah.
do this and this, and we have time
Yep.
to, it may not be running the roads, but which is more important? And what she said, Bible story time and being tucked in. Well, she had not been tucked in before, you know, with a Bible and a story and, you know, singing songs and stuff. So it was a replacement for the love that she felt that was being given from the running the roads
Right.
and that lifestyle.
Yep. Well, we're gonna have
To
to,
mine.
we're gonna have to wind this one up, Carrie.
Okay.
And this
Yeah.
we're just getting wound up, and now we gotta
Yeah.
wind it up.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
I think we're gonna carry this conversation on the next class that we have, or the
Yeah,
next group
next
we
show.
have here. And I'm looking forward to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got a lot more I wanna say about it too, because I was a step-parent and a stepson.
Yeah.
So I know that both sides of the street.
Right?
And it's a challenge.
Yes, it is.
It's a real challenge. And with that, I'm going to say good night from the Mike Siver Show. And hope to see you on the next session, Carrie. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thanks.